So that's what I'm going to talk about. Direct to shape. I think direct to object is slightly different but related. So sorry if it's boring, but Martin got in first. And it's the shape of the DTS application. So I'm not going to talk about all the techie details. It's how the sector and this application is compared to other sectors. We've been talking about it a long time. This was an old article. So printing onto cans, printing onto packaging digitally, it's been talked about for a very long time. We've got to think about what Inkjet can add, what digital adds, how easy it is to access, the pros against the cons, and the balance of cost and risk, which I think is too often overlooked. And in the end, we have to assess whether we've got the balance right so that it's tipped in favor of the pros. I'm going to reach into the past. This is there a date on this? No, there isn't. This is 2012, 2013. ToneJet were presenting this kind of thing. All the advantages of printing onto packaging to get the digital advantage across. But somehow, in those 12, 13 years, whatever it is, it hasn't actually happened. Now, we know about what's driving things. There's changes in consumer behavior, what they actually want. They want variety. We as consumers, we want variety. But how to get that variety to consumers in a cost-effective way? Because we also want low cost. And in between, there are retailers and brands that also, they have to pay attention to these small things. So this has all been talked about, as I say, for a long time. And it's who should be driving it? Should we be driving it from the technology perspective, or should it be pulled from brands? There has been some pull from brands, and we'll talk about that later. I've personally been involved in this for a long time, DTS, and I've met some very, very good things along the way. With two printhead manufacturers, both involved in this sector, this application, and now with GIS. And I'm not going to talk about the products, because there are a multitude. Konica Minolta have been very active in this sector too. What I've found across all the applications, and that goes from label through to 3D printing, it's a grind to get technology change through. There's a lot of things have to happen, and in the end, if it makes sense, then it works. And if it doesn't make sense, then people waste a lot of money, because it's expensive to develop these things. So in considering the shape of DTS, we have to consider whether this is the right sector to put the money into. And I know there's some in the audience. There's a conversation I had with one person in the audience, and I won't even look at them so that you can't see who. But somebody said to me a few years back, it'll never work, DTS. Well, it has worked, partly. There's been a lot of investment, and you can see printers for DTS, standard printers, some at the sort of 50K end, and some in the millions. And there are people who've bought them and used them successfully. But there are many more printers developed than have been successfully used. There are some of these installed around the world. ToneJet, we have Simon Edwards in the GIS team, but Simon was a driver behind the ToneJet innovation, and it does all the things that can be done. It's balance of the capital cost, the running cost, and what it does on the can. And there are it's useful for some things, but it's never going to be in the mainstream for AB InBev, for example. But that's not what it was aimed at. But it was a great innovation, as many of these things are. And the presentation slides, the snapshot of the thumbnails of all the presentations before, that was presenting the same arguments that we present today about the direct-to-shape application to consumer brands, this is a packaging event, to OEMs, to customers who produce this kind of packaging, bottlers, fillers, craft brewers. Some traction, but it doesn't any longer exist. KHS, huge player in production of PET bottles. They produce the starting point of everything that goes into a PET bottle. And plastic is a dirty word for packaging, but it's still a very effective material, and it's still growing. But this machine, which took, I think, it's more than 10 years of development. It's fantastic. It says at the top there, fantastic engineering. It is. I saw the engineering team that's involved in it. I saw the development of these machines, and I've seen it in process with Martins Beer in Belgium, producing these characters from which there was augmented reality. So you could actually have two bottles in your camera shot, and then they would talk to each other. And the dialogue came from the cloud, and it was refreshed. So you could put the two bottles together on one moment, they'd have a conversation in the sitcom characters style, and then you could open it up again, and they'd have a different conversation in character. It's quite clever. Fantastic campaign that did actually increase the sale of beer on PET bottles from one of the biggest suppliers of PET preforms in a machine that's fantastically engineered, no longer exists. Millions spent, and many years, many man-hours, many person-hours, if I should be politically correct. Brilliant people involved in KHS, and brilliant people involved in Till, which then became part of Krones. Volker Till there, you see, he's from within the industry. The Till keg is the bulk packaging for beer. So it's in his blood. He had a vision dating back to the noughties, where he thought that it was possible to print variable messaging onto packaging, on beer bottles primarily. He developed machinery on his own, put his own money into his own venture. Eventually that was sold to Krones to form Decron, and there was a Heidelberg involvement too. So it was a massive development involving the best engineering and some brilliant minds over many years. The target was up to 48,000 bottles per hour, which is still not as fast as some lines go, but it's still considerably, it would be considered as mainstream. And it was a rotating, separate modules, printing things, bottles go in, come out, and it very brilliant. I think there were two. It doesn't exist now. AB InBev had one, mothballed. So there's something there that it hasn't broken through, has it? They're also on bottles of shampoo, which waggle the bottle. Really brilliant, clever things. So you can manage the throw distance, you can get the print head printing, and instead of, because it's of the shape, you actually follow a profile and it moves the bottle to manage that profile at pretty considerable speeds. And these have been shown at exhibitions. They've been put into factories where they do things. There are products on supermarket shelves that have been printed this way, but still, it hasn't caught on. Velox. Inside, you can see it's printing tubes, cylindrical objects, cylindrical packaging. It's got hundreds of heads inside. It's a beautiful thing from an inkjet perspective, but Velox have piled a load of cash into this, and you know, you look at the situation. They've now had to downsize. The money becomes a problem. I think they had some significant contracts with some players in the market, serious players, but somehow it's not gone quite right. And I don't know what the current situation is, but it doesn't seem to have gone quite right. There's certainly some hiccups. There's some big investors, as it says down there, some big investors who've put lots of years of effort and lots of money into these things, and these are just examples. Not everything is, I'm not going to use the word failed, because every time you try something and it doesn't work, you can refine it, so it's a step along. But they've really had a hard time, and they haven't got the return on the investment. So if there have been some successes, but some other less successes, then why is that? Here's one that seems to be more successful than most, but there are quite a few of these sold, installed, working in anger, and customers repeat buying. So that repeat buying is a good sign. So if there's lots of these types of machines, and they're not aiming for this one is actually not at the 48,000 units an hour. It's a third of that, up to a third of that. But as we'll see in a bit, there's a variety of things to target. So if you target Coca-Cola with can printing, that's ambitious. That's really ambitious. But if you target sort of DIY sealants and tubes or beer cans for craft brewers, there's some very effective uses here. And they do work out. And one of the things that is a determinant is if it's reliable, if you've got uptime that doesn't cause downtime with the rest of the line. We'll come on to that. All of these companies are involved. Some own IP, some have machines, most have machines, some have very few machines, some have one machine, some have quite a few machines. So all of these have invested time. Some come from a screen background, some come from a packaging contracting background, some you would know, and some you may not know. There's some serious players in there, Koenig & Bauer, Heidelberg, Hinterkopf, Inks, they're very big. Inks is part of Cicata. All of these are significant companies putting in significant amounts of effort, and they have a customer base that is in this industry. It's a mixed picture. So there are reasons, or are they excuses? At the top there, George Orwell, some ideas are so stupid that only intellectuals believe them. It just struck me that there's some relevance here, but I'm not sure. But taking the Dragon's Den theme, there's a lot of people who get a proposition for an inkjet shape printing, direct-to-shape printer, who have that kind of face. Even if they don't show it on the front, they go back somewhere where they're counting their beans and they think, which is not success. So those are the things. I won't go through all the lists, but it's the cost of change, which is right in the middle there. The cost of change. There's a huge cost to change, to insert this, what we offer, into the lines that they operate. And if you have change, you have risk. And the risk is also troublesome, because they are working on fine margins, and if personal risk, company risk, survival risk even. So if you make errors, you can lose contracts. This is really big business, and it's on fine margins. So these are all the things that I've heard over the years, and they're all very valid. But it's the balance of pros and cons. Printing goes into a very complicated, don't worry, I'm not going to describe these processes in detail, but you can see that from raw material, raw aluminium for cans or something, granules of polymer that are turned into preforms and then blown into bottles. There are huge processes and steps along, and I'm going to give you a really boring slide coming up. But these have honed over time. They squeeze every penny out of these, and they balance the lines so there's no wasted capacity, because that costs money. So this is pressed down by consumers, by us, by retailers who sell to us because they all want to fight on price, and the brands who have to compete. There's a really competitive market for the things that go into direct-to-shape containers, or containers that could be using this technology. So the rate that it's produced has to match, and the point that it goes in also has to be appropriate. So you see the blue arrows down the side there. Now I'm going to link this to the first presentation we heard this morning, because I wanted to confirm a few things that I'd heard over the years, so I could speak to experts in GIS and who have this knowledge too. But I consulted with ChatGPT, which gave me the process from start to finish in various bottling processes for glass bottles, PET bottles, for aluminium cans, for food cans. It was interesting because the other interesting thing is different AI models, different AI packages deliver different information. But verifying all of this with more than one source, you can see there the number of units of each stage of the equipment is the type of process line that exists, and it's balanced. And each one of those, I started digging out the values there, but you get the gist. There are many millions invested in a line to produce something that costs a few pence, a few cents. This is where we have to fit printing in. Now, if you fit it in up top and print the can, then deliver the can to the filler, how do you get the can matched to the filler, to the consumer, to get the variable message targeted to the individual, or the location or the group? So the further up there you stick printing in, the less it's going to work to our advantage or deliver our advantage. If you print it right low down, that's critical because all the value's added there. So you could put it in any place there. You can put it into the can producer, like Crown Packaging, or you could put it into the fillers. And then you have to target a certain sort of filler. So that's just on metal packaging. I've got an equally boring slide here for PET. And you see some of the names in that light blue box: Krones, KHS, SIPA, Sidel. There are two of those mentioned in people who've thought about this and thought, well, we could produce printers because we've got this market. This could be an advantage for us. But they both tried and they haven't succeeded. I won't say they failed, but they haven't succeeded. I also know that the other two have also tried, but I didn't put them on the deck here because I don't know enough about that. So they make a preform. I've even had, could you print onto the preform so that then when we blow the bottle, it's got the image? So you have to print minute. Of course, that's harder still. That's adding another level of difficulty. So the answer there is no. That's stupid. But it's still a consideration because it fits into the process better, although you can't get a variable message to a targeted consumer group because it's up there, not down there. So you put the printing down here, and everything that happens with the preform, from blowing through to filling and pasteurizing or whatever you do with it, to packing and palletizing, the lower down you get it, the more likely you'll be able to target a message to customer. But the speeds, you see, it's significant. It's at the type of speed that Krones were targeting and double. So, do you use, where do you target what sort of machine are you going to build? How many is it going to process? How much engineering goes into it? What's the cost point? You can look there from cosmetic tubes, rather low volume, but also small diameter, quite difficult. Aerosol filling, which is propellant filling determining, so it depends on the propellant. Food can filling, which is slower. And then you go to beverages, where it goes right up, and you've got a min and max there. Looking at all of that, you've got to question who does it and where do they do it, like I was saying before. But the who is also important because many of these people consider that they can get a label from a specialist label printer. We don't do printing, we just do filling. Or we are a brand, we don't do anything except put it on the shelf and market it. They're not traditional printers. So you've got to fit all of that in with minimum change and risk, cost of change and risk. These guys have all tried it. They're the biggest in the business. And I could have put I'd double that and triple that. But you see the names, they're significant in themselves. Heineken, AB InBev, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, the biggest consumer brands. They've all tried it. Some of them in their own places, some of them with partners. Most of them have got equipment and they've been processing pilots. Some have done market pilots as well. These on the right, I won't go through them, they're the biggest in the contract packaging business. They've all tried it. You look at the size of the market. This is about size here on this slide. We're doing shape, but we also do size. Everybody says that they're growing. If you read all the market reports, everybody's growing at about 5-6%. Well, I don't know whether to believe that, but I do think that even though plastic has had such a bad rap, if you'll excuse the pun, it is still growing because more people exist and more people are consuming from bottles. So all of those things are growing. 4,000 plants. And there are things like shrink sleeve, which is used, so that has been growing faster. That's likely to be banned. So people can have to get their message on their containers in a different way. So there is an opportunity here. Now, digital, I said every application is a grind. Several in the room have been involved in digital label, Inkjet label. It's at 7.2% now by what I've been able to find. although you could question how that's measured. But 7.2 means there's a lot of headspace that's not, and certainly analog printing does a good job for most of the work, so you wouldn't expect it to be 100% share. But it's been a grind to get to 7.2%, but it's a viable business for quite a large number of people who are producing printing machines for digital printing machines for label. That's taken many years. Now, DTS could be, it's large enough. If you can get the right solution, then maybe it's a business for the long term, and maybe it'll hit that trigger point where something kicks in. I'm not going to read that, but I know that you might download the slides. These are things that have been written over the years, and none of this is new. There's a paper on missing the big picture, which is how decentralization, these are summaries of it, decentralization is necessary for brands to target market. So you do smaller, local, rather than bigger, central. And I think that's a general thing. It's within continent and it's intercontinental. That's a trend, and it was triggered at COVID in some ways, but it's also to try and target consumer groups. So it's no longer necessary to produce 14 languages on your pack because you're doing it in one central location for the whole of Europe, where I've said before, it means everybody can read nothing. Packaging to publishing. The hard copy that's in your hand when you're in the supermarket, if you don't do it online, what you have there is actually probably the only hard copy printed media that we read these days, because everything's on a phone or a tablet or a laptop. We don't need newspapers anymore. So it's a very valuable real estate, and if you put variable messaging on some of this packaging, it keeps it interesting, keeps it fresh, and people are satisfying to wants or needs, and it's short. So there is a publishing angle to this, and it's very valuable. I'll just go to, you see this, when I was a child, we didn't have direct shape, but we did have cornflakes packets and things where you read off it, and it was a different thing, and you choose the cereal according to what was on the packet. I'm of that age, so I was easily pleased. But that seems like a fairly typical story from my childhood and onwards. I think we live in an area where you don't need to have that. You can have a phone or a tablet in front of you, or a TV or whatever, and you can have the whole wall lit up with a moving picture and a cartoon. But that's how it starts. This is publishing real estate, and it's very valuable. So it'll be to download. You can read it if you want, but I'm not going to talk through it. So in summary, rounding up. Consumers want variety all the time, and we are consumers, so you can judge for yourself whether you like to have a bit of variety. I don't always think that variety is a good thing. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you need constancy, nothing changing, but then I'm of a certain age where maybe it's comfortable to have things that are always the same. I still like metal lids on Marmite jars, for example. But increasingly, consumers want lots more variety over time and choice. Brands are aware of this, but we haven't convinced them that they can actually do it. There is massive volume, as discussed, and you can make your own judgment on which sector's growing and which not, but they seem to all be growing. Packaging is growing, but we're trying to minimize packaging, but it's growing. I think it is growing. 4,000 bottling lines, canning bottling lines, that's a lot. Could be more, could be less. They could be lines in one place, but there are a lot. So there's a sizable market to go for. The consumer brands are focused on fractions of a cent. So it's no good sort of saying, well, your packaging is going to cost you a bit more, but you're delivering more value, because those two things are not necessarily considered in tandem. So it's quite difficult to sell that. And we've been talking, as I said, for 13, 14, 15 years on the digital advantage, how you can appeal more to your customers. It depends on the cost of change. This is massive supply chain disruption, potentially, and that doesn't come easy. So don't underestimate the costs. Down the bottom there, I won't go through it all because I think I'm out of time. There's one thing here that I will point to. Low volume bottles pay more. So hence the appeal of the craft brewing market, but then they're not capital capitalised to an extent where they can afford £1 million to put a piece of equipment in. So they're not like, it's not like an open for supplying our wares, but they're probably attacking the smaller with something that's affordable. That's probably better than going into a Coca-Cola canning line. That's really ambitious. So positioning is much more important and it's the price-performance balance. So I think that's, the shape is, hopefully we're aiming for the Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, the happy face instead of the jury's out. The shape is showing some less than success and some quite good success. It seems to be about positioning, seems to be about understanding the industry it's to serve. But even if you do understand the industry it serves, there are still some concerns and they need to be addressed. So this isn't going to be a fast, quick win type of thing. It's a grind, like most things should be with this element of change in something such a big business. So it's possible, but difficult. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Richard. That was great.